Well, welcome everybody. I want to personally welcome you to our newly rebranded version of Brains with Brian. This is a monthly series where we'll be talking to world experts in the fields of neurology, research, rehabilitation, music, technology, patient experience, and discussing all things from digital therapeutics to rehabilitation and music and neuroscience. Each month, we feature a new expert who will provide valuable insight into these important topics. This show is hosted by me, Brian Harris, and I'm the co-founder and CEO of MedRhythms. And we are a digital therapeutics company focused at the intersection of neuroscience, technology, and music to build interventions that transform the lives of those living with neurologic injury or disease. If you'd like to learn more about MedRhythms, please visit our website at www.medrhythms.com. And I hope that you'll find today's episode interesting, meaningful, and compelling. And I believe that you will. Today, I'd like to introduce our esteemed guest, Ralph Preston. Ralph is the founder of Stroke Buddies, by and for stroke survivors, a Facebook group for stroke survivors that currently has 6,000 members and is growing every day. In this online community that Ralph has built, stroke survivors can seek answers to questions, educational resources, and support. As the group owner, Ralph monitors the group and constantly answers these questions. He posts valuable content and corresponds with hundreds of stroke survivors via Facebook. This year, he launched a weekly virtual stroke survivor support group in association with MedRhythms and is assembling a team of medical professionals, PTs, OTs, physicians, neurologists, and neuroscientists who have suffered strokes themselves and are interested in sharing their stories and knowledge at these support group meetings. Ralph also started a discussion show that is shared with the Stroke Buddies community and is called Stroke Roadmap. The purpose is to help those who are transitioning their recovery from PT to home therapy. Additionally, Ralph develops and shares dozens of home therapy videos with the Stroke Buddies community that countless stroke survivors have told him are a source of inspiration and have improved their at-home recovery. Ralph has leveraged over 40 years of professional video experiences to do good with his camera, from developing high-quality videos for stroke survivors to volunteering with local nonprofits. He founded and ran a video production company prior to founding Stroke Buddies, and it is his mission to use these skills to disseminate knowledge to help others. Certainly an impressive background, Ralph, and it's an honor to have you here with us today.
Well, thank you, Brian. It's an honor for me to be here. And after that introduction, I almost believe I'm an expert. So thank you for that. I just keep at it.
Well, I appreciate that, Ralph, and I certainly think you are an expert, and certainly have added a lot of value to the stroke survivor community. And I think to get us started, we'd love to hear from I gave a background of what you do, but I'd love to hear from your perspective a bit about your background and how did you get here?
Sure. I'll try and keep this brief because I've given motivational speeches that last an hour on my background and how I got here. In fact, I gave one to your patient advisory board.
Right.
And basically, I was a fairly ordinary guy, typical guy, didn't like to listen to anybody, didn't like to go to the doctor, thought I was bulletproof and invincible. And I found out at 58 years old that I wasn't, because I had a right side hemorrhagic stroke, and I was left side affected. I know that people had strokes that were worse than mine, but I don't think anybody thinks there's anything such as a minor stroke, not anybody that's had one anyway. So I managed to do a few things fairly quickly, and they really benefited me in my recovery. Number one was I decided not to play the blame game, and that helped me put the whole that whole anxiety behind me pretty much right away. I also decided pretty quickly that I wasn't playing golf. It wasn't a mulligan. I didn't get a mulligan. I couldn't pull out another ball and drop it where I was and take another shot. So it was over, it was done. So I resolved myself to that. And to this day, I try and teach people that resolve does not equal quitting. They're two different things. You can be resolved to what's happened to you and have an action plan at the same time, believe it or not. So I did. I got home from the rehab hospital and I started walking in my driveway. I could only do one or two laps at a time. I needed somebody to, at first, to walk me with a gait belt. They disappeared after a week, and so I went into the grass and said, either I figure out how to do this on my own, or I don't walk, accepted physical therapy. So I figured it out on my own. I'm a bit of a maniac, so I went at my recovery 8 to 10 hours a day. Yes, you heard that right. I did it every hour on the hour, and I'd do about 50 minutes or so, and then I'd lay down like King Tut and never went to sleep, just let my brain rest. Somebody told me that your brain keeps making connections after you stop exercising or learning something, so I did that. Being a maniac, I looked into the concept of mass practice. Doing a lot of your recovery together helps your brain learn better. And so I was walking pretty well within 3 months, except I ignored form at the suggestion of my local PT, which was wrong. I started over again and worked on form. But I could walk at 6 months, I could walk 3 miles with pretty decent form. And I got my hand back pretty quickly too, um, by jumping on it. And actually, tomorrow I found 3 stroke survivors for our weekly meeting that are making tremendous progress just by jumping on it. And I feel like they've kind of validated something that I've been curious about in my own recovery for almost 14 years now. So we'll see how that goes. Anyway, so after I got better, I started thinking about, well, this is crazy. I mean, I just had to reinvent the wheel for myself here. You got a video camera, Ralph. You know how to get messages out. You've been doing this for 30-something years at that point. Why don't you, solve this problem? Sure. So I started shopping an idea I had to make stroke recovery videos. That led to me giving some motivational speeches. At one of those, I met someone who had a nonprofit that I started working for. I ended up running in-person stroke survivor support groups at the hospital through that organization, and I ended up meeting local stroke survivors through that, and also through a retired physical therapist that I worked with. And I ended up helping people locally with their recoveries, actually going over their house and teaching them stuff, and actually standing at the counter and marching and doing whatever I was having them do with them. So I did that for a few years, and when I started, there were no videos on recovery. There were no Facebook groups. I mean, when I had my stroke, Facebook groups started showing up 5, 6, 7 years ago, and so I started one, and I'm kind of following a natural progression. Basically, what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to be the person that I wish I could have talked to after my stroke, but they didn't exist. And now with the Facebook group and building a community and the website and the nonprofit, we're trying to take that to the next level. So that's some basic background.
Well, thanks for that, Ralph. And we got a bunch to dig into there. And, I'd love to dig in, a little bit later on about those, we in the, I guess, the rehab community and sort of in industry talk about them as unmet needs. But when you really talk about what was missing, right? But we'll dive into that in a moment. And when you think about this group that you started, 2017, I believe it was, Stroke Buddies, what was really the core mission there that you were trying to accomplish? What were you trying to do? And can you talk a little bit about how it's grown since then?
Sure. Well, I started because I was basically, no one could afford I put together a proposal for a video project, talking to neurologists and everything. I chopped it at all the hospitals. Nobody could afford the whole thing. Everybody was willing to help me. I finally got somebody, Tri-State Stroke Network, who was thinking about funding the entire thing, and they were one of 5 regional stroke centers, and they had their funding pulled by the CDC, and they all disappeared. and so did my project. So I started looking at other things that I could do, which was form a Facebook group, also point the video camera at myself, and start doing exercise videos. So Stroke Buddies exists for the same reason that I was shopping that project, because they release 800,000 of us a year to reinvent the wheel for ourselves, and I just think that's insane. There's no real plan or program for stroke survivors. Like there's a lot more for, let's say heart attack. If you have a heart attack, and even if you're in a small town, in my small town, there was nothing for stroke survivors, yet the local hospital had a heart attack club. That's what the members called it. It had some other official name. And they were tied into a gym, and they walked on the greenway, but there was nothing like that for stroke survivors. So Stroke Buddies was an extension of that growth. Boy, that was a joke. I seeded it with about 25 or 30 friends who might be interested, and professionals, medical professionals that I had met to start it, and about 5 of them dropped out the first week. And it took 18 months to get to 100 members.
18 months.
18 months just to get from 25 to 100. And then I hit 1,000 within a year after that, and then 2,000, and started slowing down around 3 or 4. I don't know what I did right or wrong in the beginning or any of it. I don't really, I mean, I have a plan. I get up every day and I work on this, but I'm not necessarily privy to what's working and what's not working out there. So I just keep, as you say, pushing the elephant,
right?
And eventually you'll move it. So that's why I started, and basically it's a collaborative group. We try and help each other. One of the things that we believe in, other than sharing, we share knowledge and experience. And one of the things that we believe in is that as a stroke survivor, you have to take ownership of your own recovery before you really can move anywhere. You have to put all the acceptance stuff and take responsibility before you really, putting most of your energy into your recovery. Let's see, one more thing. As a video producer, I've always believed, well, we shoot interviews, and basically what we're doing is when you're selling something, you're showing somebody who made the decision to somebody who is about to make that decision. Well, it's the same with stroke recovery. I think the most powerful message that you can show a stroke survivor is somebody else getting better at home on their own through a video. And so I started recruiting anybody and everybody I saw, being a video professional myself. Anytime I saw anybody doing videos, and there were very few in the beginning, I would recruit them into the group. And sooner or later, we had, a number of people who were posting these videos. Well, what happens is people respond to the culture around them. That's one reason it's important to keep a positive culture. When new members land in the group, I want them, to experience a really positive culture. And one of the things they see is all these videos. And it's remarkable what's happened in the last 6 months. We've actually recruited almost over 1,500 members in the last 3 months. And a lot of them come in and they see all this video activity, and we've had people posting videos a couple days after they join the group. They, like I said, people respond to the culture around them. So they see all this positivity and all these videos, and they go, hey, I can do this too. And that would be the exact point of having this group. Making people say, hey, maybe I should give this a try. Maybe I can do this. So that's the deal with Stroke Buddies. I've also noticed that now these members are starting to take these videos to other groups that they're members of. They go, well, I made this video, I may as well post it in the other groups. So it's interesting to me because I feel like I kind of started this culture, and to see it spread to other groups, I think it's great. I mean, I
Yeah.
don't have any ownership issues with anything. I do everything I do is free. I think everything should be shared because we're all in the same. We're all members of the club we wish we didn't belong to.
Hmm. Yeah, that's pretty profound, Ralph. And I mean, you certainly have led by example there. And I think for those folks, I mean, many people know what Facebook is, right? And many people know these groups, but people can come, ask questions, post videos. You're also a resource of many of these videos. And one of the things you just said there, which was about pushing stroke survivors to take ownership of their own recovery. What does that mean to you? Like that statement, and why is that important? Why does that need to be said?
Well, I mean, ask any physical therapist. You did clinic, and so I know that there's a certain number of people that look for the solution outside themselves. They typically do this throughout life, not just in stroke recovery. I'm a person that always tries to figure things out. I think that it's up to me to come up with the answer. So that's why we're kind of purporting this philosophy. Another reason is it seems to work. All the people that seem to be getting better at home have come to this level of acceptance and taken responsibility for it. I do the silly thing about how to have a relationship with your physical therapist, and I'd say, engage with them, work out a plan with them, get homework from them. You'll have a completely different relationship because they know the difference between someone that does that and someone that goes in, here's the goofy part, and goes, okay, I'm here, make me better. Nobody can make you better.
Mhm.
Physical therapists are like piano teachers. What would happen when I mean, I took piano lessons. What would happen if I didn't practice all week and my piano teacher showed up? Well, my parents would be mad because they're paying for the lessons. I'd look like a fool and I wouldn't have made any improvement. And so the piano teacher can't teach you, they can teach you how to play, but they can't do the work for you. And that's the analogy here. So when you take what it means to me, accepting responsibility for your recovery means that you realize that the cavalry is not coming for you. And
Mhm.
that if it's going to happen, you're going to have to make it happen. And that's a sorry thing. But that's the way it is. And we have to deal with, the way it is.
Right. I love that analogy, Rob. I mean, obviously it's music, but I love that analogy that, the clinician is there to guide you to show you how, but the clinician can't make you better without your active engagement with it. And I think it really lends to this other point here that we think about a lot of med rhythms too. I mean, as a company that's built to try to help stroke survivors, where historically in healthcare, it's been told to stroke survivors by clinicians, by physicians, by their doctors, perhaps even, that once you get to a certain point in your recovery, right?
Uh,
Typically, this is seen to be maybe it's 6 months, maybe it's roughly a year, that's when your recovery stops. So where the gains that you make within that first year of recovery is all that you will make. We now know that there's research in neuroscience. We've done our own research at MedRhythms to show that that's fundamentally not true. But as a stroke survivor yourself and somebody who is so engaged with that stroke survivor community, that is trying to reach these folks, that are providing these exercises to these people to do in home. And we know that many of these people that are engaged with your Facebook group and are doing these exercises are years post-stroke, right? What is your perspective on that?
well, okay. So I'm preaching that neuroplasticity lasts a lifetime.
Mm.
Because it does. I'm also trying to undo the whole thing that mostly doctors, mostly older doctors, because that's what they learned in medical school. A 25-year-old nurse won't tell you that that the clock stops ticking at 6 months, and it doesn't. And it comes from it's a misconception that comes from a fact, and the fact is that, and they pick 6 months. There's no magic. It's not like a light switch, somebody turns it off, but they say that you have the most neuroplasticity closest to the insult, and they pick 6 months. So they say maximum neuroplasticity lasts 6 months. Well, that may be true, and that's why one reason that uh, we're all now trying to encourage people to jump on it. Take advantage of that neuroplasticity. Don't sit over there in the corner, have a pity party, and we in the video business we say burn daylight, but in this case should be burning neuroplasticity.
Mm-hmm.
So uh, it's it's important that people, kind of accept that they're the ones that's going to have to do this for themselves.
Yep. No, I appreciate that perspective. And as part of you being the administrator to this to Stroke Buddies through Facebook, much of your job as that in that role is answering questions from members. And as we mentioned, you've got 6,000 plus members as part of this group now, and people that get to ask questions. It's sort of like a forum. You do your best to answer them. What are some of the most frequently asked questions that come through the page?
Well, probably the number one most asked question is about hope. They come in categories, and hope is a big category. We're in the business of providing hope. Actually, that's one thing that the videos do. You see somebody else, going down the steps, no hands, and you go, I'm close to that. Maybe I'll give that a try. Maybe I'll get my significant other to stand at the bottom of the steps just in case. But so hope is one. The most common post is, and you can insert different language here. Has anybody had a pontine CVA or pontine stroke? And you can insert anything. They're always very specific. It's always, guess what? It's exactly the kind of stroke they had themselves. Mm-hmm. And they say that's, made a complete recovery after 6 months, 1 year, 2 years. You can insert whatever number you want there because that's exactly where they're at. So they basically describe the stroke they had. They want to hear about people who've had a full recovery from that specific stroke. And they want to know that it can happen at 2 years out because they're 2 years out. So that's number one. Probably number two is like life experiences, stuff you can't get from the physical therapist. It's stuff you can only get from another stroke survivor. Stuff like, has anybody taken a trip in a car? Has anybody dealt with a wheelchair on an airplane? Has anybody got on an airplane? Has anybody been on a cruise? What about a wheelchair on a cruise? I'm planning to go on an 8-hour drive on vacation. That kind of thing. Oh yeah, roller coasters. I don't know why everybody's so. I would not get on a roller coaster to save my life post-stroke, but a lot of people like them, and they want the group to grant them permission to go on a roller coaster. I tell them my stand on the brakes story, where I tested my brakes in the parking lot next door, and I had to lay down for about an hour and a half after it because I really stood on the brakes and it stood on my brain. Anyway, so, has anyone done this? Posts are pretty common. Other questions are, about the future. They're kind of like, has anyone, but they're kind of like aimed at the future. And they're, or sometimes medical things like, has anybody, gotten their license back? How long did it take you to drive again? Who here is going back to work? And, there's sub-questions to all this, did your employer make accommodations or not and all that. Has anyone had a PFL closure? That's a hole in your heart for people who don't know. Or what about, I'm supposed to have a loop recorder implanted next week. I'm scared. Usually, well, that's what they are. They have a question, they're fearful, they're scared of the loop recorder. Does it hurt? I mean, I've heard that a number of times on the loop recorder. And another one is there are a couple more. They celebrate daily tasks. I managed to put my bra on today. I managed to button my shirt. I figured out how to button my shirt one-handed. I'll show you how. I learned how to tie back my hair, or tie my shoes, or cut my food. Or I learned some one-handed techniques that I'll share with you. So those kinds of things. Another big category is, mindset. How, a lot of people ask, unfortunately, I'm going crazy. How do you all deal with this?
Mm-hmm.
That's a big one. So, then we get into the whole acceptance thing and, the necessity of letting go of anger before you can, really start heading down the recovery road. One more is, anybody try the Bioness L300, or what's the deal with this Myomo arm,
Mm-hmm.
Can you get insurance to pay for it because it costs $80,000? Those kinds of questions. And again, those are things that only stroke survivors can answer. Well, I mean, the guy who sells it can answer it, but you're going to get a different answer from them. And we try and discourage any kind of medical advice. What kind of pills should I take? My first comment will be, talk to your doctor. No, don't believe me. I always say that too. Don't believe me or anyone here, because we're not physicians. Of course, I had a physician pop in one time and say, I'm a medical doctor. But he didn't say much because, as a true physician, he's not seeing that patient. He really shouldn't be saying anything if he doesn't have his chart.
Right.
And another one we get a lot of, especially recently, is we're getting a lot of positive feedback because of the positive culture.
Mm-hmm.
If you go on Facebook, I can give you the name of a member of 20 groups. And if you go into any of them, you won't find the videos. You'll find a lot more woe is me posts. You won't find helpful answers in the to questions. And, like, again, back to the new members making videos. They come in, they see everybody answering questions. They start sharing their knowledge. It's just, I think people respond to the culture around them. I said it about 3 times in that MedRhythm's patient advisory board meeting. But it's really true. So we just try and create as positive a culture as we can.
And I suspect that's one of the reasons why you've had such success there. And I mean, I think that premise is not just about who you surround yourself with through your Facebook profile too, but in life. I mean, we become who we surround ourselves with, right? And I think, the points that you hit on is people are looking for that common thread of, we all know that each person is different, each stroke is a bit different, but there's common themes, and people want an example of what success can look like, and to show that they're not alone, right? And this is the beauty of this type of support group.
Well, and actually, it's unspoken. I mean, there are no posts like this, but the underlying theme in everything, the 6 different types of posts, groups of posts that I mentioned, is the same thing. Because, I felt it in the early days. I thought, like, I'm the only one dealing with this. I mean, I knew the 800,000 number because, I was using it in my trying to promote doing something about it. But you can know that number and you're still sitting at home by yourself with no answers, and you feel really alone. So the one thing that, the biggest thing I think that these groups provide is commonality. You can, well, sometimes that person who has to have had a pontoon CVA, anybody else have a pontoon CVA at 2 years, somebody will come in and say, I got better after 3 years and I had a stroke in the same place. Well, that'll make them feel pretty good, give them some hope. But the main thing it does is it makes people feel connected to other people who are going through the same thing. And I think that makes the whole pity party acceptance thing easier to deal with. It's a lot easier to get wacky when you're sitting at home alone with your brain just spinning. And if you're involved in a community that of like-minded individuals, particularly a group that's trying to get better, remember we're all helping each other out. Almost nobody, I don't block them or anything, but almost nobody posts memes or jokes, or we try and encourage music. We actually try and encourage, if somebody out there wanted to post a funny meme a day. I think laughter is an important thing, but we have very little. The group looks very, very different than a lot of the other Facebook groups, and that's pretty much by design. And I suppose it's pretty much by my design.
Yeah, it's a wonderful thing, Ralph. So appreciate that perspective.
We're focusing on recovery.
Right. Exactly. Exactly. And I think, you know what, to dive in, I think even a little bit more specific as we think about recovery. I mean, a lot of the videos that you're posting on there have to do with exercises related to walking or strengthening that allow you to sort of improve walking. And I know that that's how we met each other originally. We're a company that's building products to try to help stroke survivors improve walking based upon the neuroscience of music. When we think about just walking post-stroke, how does the deficits that come from stroke that impact walking impact somebody's quality of life as a stroke survivor?
Ugh. Well, there are probably two or three levels to that at least. You know, unfortunately, there's some people who get whacked hard enough, as I put it, have bad enough stroke that they don't get out of wheelchairs. There's also some people that don't have the mindset to get out of a wheelchair. And, that's really limiting. If you have limited, and same thing if, as long as you're walking with a cane or a rollator or a walker or something, or not walking very far on your own. In both those cases, your mobility is severely limited, and that
Mhm.
changes your life. I mean, you can't go shopping, you can't drive a car typically. You're very much more dependent on other people. So that would be the big difference there. As a stroke survivor, I can tell you the one thing that bugged me the most the first 6 months was having to have somebody else tie my hair back or tie my shoes. No one wants to be a burden on anybody else, and people around stroke survivors sometimes aren't the most patient people. So it's funny. Family often responds positively, but sometimes they're not as supportive as you might think they are. But the point here is that everybody wants to. I talked about it. I have a section on it in the first motivational speech. The road to independence. Everybody wants to be independent. And if you're in a wheelchair or a walker, you have less to, less independence. You're more dependent on other people to do things. And if you get to where you can walk on your own, then you're kind of involved in a lifelong challenge to learn how to walk better. And that can sound discouraging, but I actually do try and tell people that it's kind of a lifelong thing. Am I doing 8-10 hours of physical therapy every day now, so almost 14 years later? No. Do I do small amounts of maintenance stuff? Absolutely, because it's not like a set it and leave it kind of thing. The brain needs to repeat those tasks occasionally and be challenged. So, uh, if you like me, I work on walking. There are a number of people in our group that some stroke survivors look at them and say, "I'd be happy to do that," and I'd stop, but they're not satisfied with that, and so it's kind of a lifelong project. I don't want people to think it's like a sentence. It's a lifelong project. Your life changed. You had a life changing event.
Right.
So we work on walking better.
And the important point to take away there, if I might double click on that for a moment, is that
Sure.
we can get better, right? So the important point is, yes, it's a lifelong process to improve, but that improvement is possible for the rest of your life. And I think that as long as we work on it.
Right, and I've shot videos of me throwing a tennis ball at 11 years to prove there's neuroplasticity. I quote, people go, "My hand's still frozen." I said, I'm 4 years out, and I go, "I have a friend who got her hand back by doing housework at 5 years."
Mm-hmm.
And it's a true story. No one would know her, but I could give you her name right now. Um, so again, we're back to the whole positivity and giving hope that's the greatest thing that any of these communities can
Certainly.
do.
Certainly. And as we think about improving walking, you've had an opportunity by virtue of what we call our product lab, where we send our product, which consists of sensors and a mobile device and headphones, to stroke survivors across the country to get their feedback on user experience, ease of use, the product in general. You've had the opportunity to use that. And where do you live, Ralph? For the viewers
South
at home?
Carolina. South Carolina.
In South Carolina. So you've had an opportunity to use this to walk around in South Carolina. Tell us about your experience with it.
Okay. Well, I'm kind of a real analytical and detail-oriented and somewhat over-the-top individual.
Mm-hmm.
So I have different experiences. I love testing things also, and I made it clear to Sarah Cooper at your company that she was going to get a different kind of response from me than she would typically get. And I gave it to her. I wrote a couple of paragraphs. I usually would come back from walking and walk directly to my computer and write down my thoughts immediately. We're within 10 minutes. Okay, so what were those thoughts? Well, I found that it clearly distracted me somewhat from overthinking. I call it overthinking, you call it cognitive interference, but this is that the overlay of your brain applying cognitive stuff, like thinking about every darn step you take from my perspective. That's what it is. And so it clearly helped with that. There was something about the music that engaged me a bit, and I got into the rhythm, and I liked the metronome.
Mm-hmm.
I wish I had a dial for it. I didn't tell Sarah that. I wish I could dial it up or down. It dials itself up or down depending on how well you're doing your entrainment, how well you're in training. What's the verb form of that?
In
Either way?
training. That's very good. In training is the verb, yes.
Okay. Because I know it's entrainment, but I've never used it as a verb before. So depending on how well you're doing with your entrainment, the metronome will change. And a couple other things I found was I very much got into the music. I found that I was wanting to, for whatever reason, I wanted to hit the downbeat in the metronome with my affected foot, not my unaffected foot. And if I got out of whack, I'd always work my way back to hitting the downbeat with that affected foot. There was just something about it. And in doing that, and somehow or another, that cognitive layer that I typically imposed on my walking pretty much went away. So I found that I never saw the reports, and I don't really know how to analyze them, but I would guess that as I got into it, I felt that it was speeding me up slightly, and I felt that my walking was slightly to somewhat, let's not say slightly, was somewhat smoother.
Mm-hmm.
Life-changingly smoother? No, but I only took about 8 walks with it before it got too hot. It gets 95 degrees and 98% humidity around here, and it's just no fun to walk.
Yeah, I can
So
imagine. I can imagine.
it's kind of like when it's 10 degrees and 20 below wind chill factor. It's no fun to walk.
Yes, I can relate to that, Ralph, without a doubt. And it's great to hear your perspective. And one of the things that I can say, as the co-founder of the organization, that I'm most proud of in this process is that we've been very focused on what we call sort of user in the loop development. And what we mean by that is that we've since day one had stroke survivors and those living with other neurodisease and injury really helping us as we've been developing the algorithm to giving us feedback on the user experience so that we can optimize that experience for the people that will use them. And that's been something that it's been very important to us. You mentioned our patient advisory board. Why do you think that that's important for companies to do, to include, end users or stroke survivors? Because while I'm glad that you had that visual reaction, Ralph, I would say, it's not something that happens often in this world. So why is that important?
Well, I mean, first of all, I think it's really smart of you and your company to involve stroke survivors. Well, I think it's really important because guess what? We're the market or the audience or whatever you want to call it that they're trying to serve. So, um, you know, I don't know. I suppose the rollator was invented for old people and people with other issues other than stroke, but there are an awful lot of stroke survivors who could use one if
Hmm.
somebody had thought not to make the brakes on both handles. So
Hmm.
if you're hemiplegic and you got a hand like this, you can't use a rollator. So, there's 7 million stroke survivors in the United States. So the rollator market is basically currently excluding 7 million potential sales, or
Mm.
not to every single
Sure.
person, but that's
Right.
that's the demographic on it. So, um, if you're going to make a product for somebody, get their feedback. I mean, I know I provided Medrose and Sarah a lot of feedback, and I'm sure that other stroke survivors did the same thing, and I think that should be an important part of any design. I'm a big believer in servos. Servos are a type of feedback. I mean, they're attached to a motor typically, but if you use it in the grander scheme of things, what you're doing is you're taking the feedback and feeding it back into the loop and
Hmm.
possibly changing the way it works. So in this case, the way it's designed based on that feedback. And that's just seems really smart to me because otherwise you're operating in the blind. I mean, as much as you know about stroke, you still haven't had one. So,
Exactly.
I mean, and I don't mean that as a dig at you. And please, dear God, don't have one. You don't want to, you don't want to have one. Um, but so, we're in a unique position to provide some input that just wouldn't be available any other way.
Hmm. No, I appreciate that perspective. And you may have just mentioned this in the answer to your question, but if you had one piece of advice to give to companies who are innovating in stroke rehab, what would that be?
Oh, well, I guess it'd be, sort of what I just, similar to what I just said. Remember who the end user is. The other thing is test the product in real life situations. I think some of these products are tested in labs and things, and, they don't have gravel in labs, okay? I mean, gravel can, mess up walking or a walker or a rollator. I'm just picking on gravel, but because it's real world. Another thing, this is just kind of a pet peeve. It really annoys most of us to see these able-bodied people demonstrating products for
Hmm.
people have disabilities issues or in recovery, whatever you want to call it. That's one reason I think that my YouTube channel has a lot of credibility. Everybody can look at me and they can see in some cases that well, it's not shaking now. Sometimes I have a little shake. I don't, they can see, if you're paying attention, you can see minor deficits. And I also, for that reason, I do everything like one take. I have a couple of videos where my camera guy, he doesn't do it anymore because of my answer. He said, take two. And I'll go, nope, keep it rolling. This is real life. And I
Hmm.
actually leave that in, even though I voice over the videos. Because there's, we believe each other more than we believe vendors.
Hmm.
Now, doctors, we tend to believe, and we don't get advice. Like I mentioned earlier, it's not a good idea to get medical advice. But if it comes down to like, have you gone on an airplane? Have you used MedRhythm's product? Have you whatever? We count on each other
Hmm.
a lot more than we do on anybody else because we have credibility. And so, if you involve people in the design and testing and redesign of your product, I think you're going to have a better product and it's going to push that credibility button a lot better. We're not we're not dumb out here. I mean, just because we had a stroke doesn't mean we don't see that you're using actors or whatever.
Right.
Um, so
Right.
that would be my advice to companies innovating.
I love it, Ralph. Thank you. Thank you for that perspective. I think it's important. It's important for all of us to hear as we're developing these products to try to help. And how do we do that the best that we can? So thanks for that perspective. Um, I guess last couple of questions here. What kind of music do you like, Ralph? What are you listening to?
Well, right now, okay, so I'm basically I'm 71 years old. I grew up in the original hippie era. If you're a couple years older than me, you missed it. If you're 10 years younger than me, you missed it too. So I grew up on classic rock, and I don't think I'm the only one that thinks that the music that we had when I was growing up is the best music. My daughter happens to listen to it, and my nephew happens to play it in bars and clubs.
Oh, fun.
So there are other people out there, but so I'm kind of a classic rock guy, but I also enjoy other types of music, jazz, classical guitar, um, most anything. I'm not a big opera or rap fan, but I'd tolerate them if I had to. Um, so lately, I've been listening to. I've always liked guitar for whatever reason. When I was about 17 or 18, I had every B.B. King album ever made back to 1947, and the gospel ones, and actually met him on the pitcher's mound at Fenway Park after a concert with Lucille.
Wow.
And I made Eric Clapton a couple of guitar straps and sent them to RSO, Robert Sigward Organization. I was trying to remember what RSO stood for last night. It's funny how the brain works.
There it
Just
is.
in my head. Bingo. So I sent it to Robert Sigwood, and recently um, I did something that I wasn't expecting to do. I'm mentoring two, or coaching, whatever you want to call it. So I'm stroke buddies with two young guys who were had strokes and they were guitarists, and oh, they're just like they have a burning desire to want to get back to playing guitar. It was their life. And so I decided, well, I should put them together. I sometimes take two people like that, like spaghetti, and I throw it against the wall and see if it sticks.
Hmm.
Sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't. So I stuck them together. It kind of stuck. I suggested they form a group. They kind of said, yeah, it's a good idea. They didn't do it. I'm real impatient. So about 2 or 3 days later, I formed a guitar group, and now one of them has become an admin, and he's holding Zoom meetings on things that you can do for finger techniques. It's up to about 40 people with no promotion. And I think eventually it'll have some legs. And so I posted a couple of. I figured it should be fun too, and I
Hmm.
don't have anything. As I'm not a guitarist, so I don't have anything to contribute. So I posted some cool stuff like Mark Knopfler and Chet Atkins playing guitar together,
Neat.
and one thing I was asking some of these guys was if they ever heard of the Chapman stick, and nobody much knew about it. I heard somebody play it 30 something years ago in a small club, and it was like life changing. I went, how the hell is that guy making all that sound come out of that one instrument?
Mm.
So I've been listening to a lot of Chapman stick music lately. I turned a couple people in Stroke Buddies onto it, and now one of them now today said, well, who else do you listen to? So I said, well, there's always Al Di Meola and Django Reinhardt if you want to go way back. So I got somebody in the group listening to Django Reinhardt today while they're doing E-stem.
Amazing.
So,
Have you ever
well,
played before?
I played when I was about 15 or 16, and I really wasn't good. I mean, I could do like Keith Richards, Rolling Stones, or, Kinks, You Really Got Me,
Yeah.
three, three bar chords.
Couple of chords. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Um, I don't know. I guess I graduated high school and dropped it. I did own a guitar at one point. I was better at the piano.
Yeah.
Um,
Any other
so
instruments that you played?
any other instruments? I play the ears. I listen really good.
Love that. and quite eclectically, as we've just learned from your description of the music that you enjoy, uh, which is amazing.
Well, I mostly went into guitar, but
Yeah.
I know a fair amount about classic rock. I don't know that much about some other types, but
Mhm.
I enjoy music. It's funny because it's actually, for whatever reason, has as I've gotten older, it's become less important. There was a time when I was in my teens and early 20s where I basically lived for music.
Mhm.
We bought I had a hippie leather shop. We used to buy albums the day they came out and would first play them, one play on the record player directly to the Tandberg at 7.5, not 3 3/4. So I had first recordings of everything.
Awesome.
It would like take like Layla when Eric Clapton's Layla came out. We'd just flip that sucker over all day long.
I love it.
Same with like Carole King when her first album came out. It was on the charts for 130 weeks. Still the longest record on the chart. So
Amazing.
it was real important then, but I guess, maybe having a hippie leather shop and having music blaring and was part of the whole deal back then.
Well, you listen to some legends, that's for sure.
Well,
That's
I
incredible.
could tell you I've seen some real legends. I went to see Carole King at Carnegie Hall, and James Taylor came out and did the third set up on the roof and everything
Amazing.
with her. I lucked into a number of good concerts. I don't really go to concerts between I haven't been post-stroke. I wasn't liking all the people pre-stroke. I
Hmm.
really wouldn't like. Stroke survivors don't like being around in big crowds. It's leftover from the early days when you feel like nobody's paying attention to you. So you're in a big crowd and you're basically looking for who's getting ready to knock you over.
Mm.
So,
It's good
and of
perspective.
course I looked at James Taylor and Jackson Brown in Charleston. The tickets were 120 in the nosebleed section to about $1,600 a piece down on the floor. I mean, I love music, but
It's tough.
$1,600?
It's tough.
Not that much.
Yeah, that's tough. That's tough. Well, thanks, Ralph, for that. I've got one final question as we wrap up
Sure.
here. We're coming up on time. And as we think about the future, what does the future of, we can call it stroke rehabilitation research, or what does the future of stroke care or research in stroke care look like to you?
Well, I'm going to answer what I'd like to see it look like because I'm
Yes.
not really happy with the way it is right now. I don't think that we have enough of a voice and say so in things. It seems odd to me, and I don't know that there's any way to change this. This is bigger than, I mean, having a goal of fundamentally changing stroke recovery, which is my goal, is huge enough. But the way the paradigm works is the insurance companies are on top and we're on the bottom, despite the fact that who's paying for the insurance companies? We are. So why are we at the bottom? Anyway, it seems to me that there are a lot of good physical therapists out there. Don't get me wrong, but you don't always get one, and um, a lot of times they run out of ideas. They don't quite know what to do. They refer to what I call the playbook a lot,
Mhm.
and the playbook needs to be updated. The playbook does not have enough science in it, as far as I'm concerned. Uh, I've heard the word neuroplasticity mentioned in physical therapy, but it's never been explained to me or anybody in any of the groups that I've asked. Maybe one or two people said they had an unusual experience. So, um, what we're getting um, isn't what we feel we need. The other thing is, I think that, I mean, I know I innovated some things with patterning and stuff. I didn't invent them because they were out there before. And but I adapted them to stroke recovery, and I think that, and I see other people doing that in my group and in other groups. Like I said, we're just because we had a stroke, it didn't make us dumb,
Mhm.
and
Right.
so I see a lot of people figuring out things, and I would like to see the future of stroke recovery involve stroke survivors in the research, all the way from the research to the implementation, because I think we've got something to add. I don't particularly like the playbook, and I don't think there's enough science or neuroplasticity involved. And I'd also like to see a lot more research and funding of techniques that work. You're doing it a little bit, and uh, maybe Dr. Adler is at Boston University, and there's a stroke recovery research center near me that I've worked with at the Medical University of South Carolina. But there's very little research going on as to what is effective in stroke recovery. We just keep getting out the playbook and say, the playbook says this, so do this. And I'd like to see that whole thing change, and I'm trying to be a part of making that happen because I don't see anybody else doing it. So if you want it done and nobody's doing it, what do you got to do? You got to step up to the plate and take a swing at it.
And that you have done very well, Ralph. And thanks for the work that you're doing and the value that you provide to the stroke community abroad, both stroke survivors and elsewhere as well. And it's a worthy mission. And as you said, if you don't do it, who's going to, right? And I appreciate you for taking the step, taking the responsibility to be a driving force in the community. So thank you for your time. Thank you for your insight. It's been an honor to have a conversation with you, and look forward to our continued conversations and collaboration in the future, Ralph.
I appreciate you having me, and I look forward to them too. And who else might do it is maybe me and you and a few other people that we can recruit to the cause. I mean, that's kind of what I see our partnership as. And we want something pretty simple. We want a seat at the table, and we want our recoveries to be more focused, because when we see focused recoveries, we see people improve. And when we see people take, the fire everywhere, splat everywhere approach, it doesn't seem to work as well. So we'll see what we can do going forward.
That's right. And in all of that, we are stronger together than we are individually, right? So this is important.
Right. That's what I say to the group, that unfortunately it's a numbers game. It's not about having members and whatever, but I mean the numbers per se. But people look at numbers, and when together we have power. Separately, we're individual voices. So together we have a stronger voice and more power. So that's why I'm trying to assemble a large community. I think if we have 100,000 people in a community, that people aren't going to be able to ignore that.
Yep, it makes an impact. Certainly does. It certainly does. Well, thank you so much, Ralph. Thanks for your time. An honor to be here with you. And thank you all for being here with us today and for watching. And keep an eye out for our next episode, where the next guest will be announced very soon. And as a reminder, if you'd like to watch this episode again, or want to learn more about MedRhythms, you can check out our website, www.medrhythms.com. And thanks again for tuning in.